All right, welcome back for another episode of Community Capital. My name is Rob Johnson. We have another great show for you today. Joining me in studio is Amy Gallegos. She is the owner of Peak Physical Therapy here in Brighton, Michigan. Amy, welcome to the studio.
Thank you very much, Rob.
So when you go through really any town, city, you see a ton of different physical therapists. Mm-hmm. And what I've come to understand is not all physical therapists, not all practices are created equally. Yeah. Some of them have different philosophies on how they handle that discipline of medicine. So I want to get to what makes Peak different, but I want to go back to what led you down the road of becoming a physical therapist. So let's start with a little bit about Amy.
Absolutely. When I was 14, I was a lifelong soccer player, played since I was 3 years old. And at 14, I had moved up here from Florida. I was brought into Olympic development and a Livonia team as well. And while I was at the Olympic development camp at the end of the year, I tore my ACL. And
Oh, wow.
I did 3 months of physical therapy after the first surgery. And then at my first game back, I was actually marking Miriam Cavanaugh, who's now a judge in the area, wild, and took a long stride and toward the rest of it. 9 months of more physical therapy. I was very interested in this area. I thought, man, these people get to work out with their patients. You're active. You're not just sitting at a desk. I've been an athlete my entire life. I love this. And so I started shadowing other physical therapists in other areas. I started looking at surrounding areas like being a personal trainer. I went to General Motors and did their track of going in and doing blood pressure screenings and exercise classes and nutrition classes, but everything kept leading me back to physical therapy because I was more interested in solving the puzzle of what's wrong. I was more interested in the injuries and the process of how do we get you better. So beyond learning about exercising and proper movement pattern, so went to Kalamazoo College and got my undergrad in pre-med, and that whole time kept looking at different areas, but still physical therapy. So I went to University of Michigan, got my doctorate, and when I got out, very interested in the really complex problems.
So start to finish, let's say you finish high school, you go into your first year of college. How long would it take if someone just went straight through to become a physical therapist? How many years?
7.5 years. 4 years of undergrad, 3.5 year doctorate.
Okay, very good. So, seemingly 25, 26, someone would be able to start out, practicing as a doctor of
physical therapy. Yeah.
Okay, that makes sense. All right, so then going from finishing with your doctorate to opening your own practice, what was that process like?
So, like I said, I was most interested in the complicated cases. So I would tend to get the patients who needed more time. And I loved that, getting down to the root issue of what was happening, spending more time hands-on with them. And most physical therapy clinics don't allow you to spend that whole hour one-on-one with a patient. You're seeing multiple people in that hour. And so I realized I really need to open my own clinic. And that bug was put in my ear as soon as I got out of PT school, because the therapists that I worked for, they helped a lot of other physical therapists open their own clinics. So my eyes were open to that entrepreneurial mindset from the beginning. It was Amy and Rodney Goebel who owned Michigan Rehabilitation Specialists. And we were really a family. It was great. And everybody worked together well. And as they got bigger and bigger, they ended up selling off to ATI. And that was right at the same time that my children were older and they were in school full time. And that was when I had planned on taking that next step. So, unfortunately, instead of that next step being with them, or fortunately, actually, I took that step on my own and opened Peak Physical Therapy so that I could spend that one-on-one time with each patient and do things the way I wanted to do them. So it ended up being a blessing that I was able to follow my own path.
Great. And how long has Peak been open?
10 years. February 23rd this year was our 10-year anniversary. So we'll have a little ribbon cutting this summer when the weather's nicer.
Well, congratulations.
Thank you.
That officially puts you in the vast, vast, vast minority of businesses that make it 10 years.
Yes,
So
especially with COVID.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
Well, the other thing too is we can take this conversation in probably 10 different directions.
Yeah.
But one thing is how much private equity is entering into the physical therapy space and buying up smaller practices, which I would imagine is something that you don't love because that probably takes away from your philosophy of how patients ought to be looked at and treated.
Absolutely. They have wonderful marketing, lots of money behind them.
Oh, for
I've
sure.
had multiple companies approach me about partnering, but it does move away from why I created Peak Physical Therapy. So I've chosen not to go that route, to stay on my own, which is harder, but thank goodness word of mouth makes a big difference. So people who have come to see me typically say, my son, my daughter, my parents, my husband needs to come see you. Once they come in and they see this is what we can do for you.
Yeah.
So it's really been wonderful. But yeah, it's definitely hard when there's much bigger groups out there kind of gobbling up everything. Yeah. I don't know that it helps physical therapy in the long run.
Yeah. And time will certainly tell on that. I would tend to agree with you that, anytime you have, a lot more of a corporate structure on something that's very personal and something that needs to be applied very directly, it can sometimes blur what should be done or the level at which should be done in the name of profit, or we need to get this done quicker, or we can only have 15 minutes instead of 45.
Yes.
It becomes a bigger problem. So walk me through what makes Peak different and how you try to make an impact in the patients that you have.
Absolutely. It's really threefold. So the one-on-one hour, we focus first on educating patients about proper posture and movement pattern, because that's really at the heart of injuries and recovery. Then we move into releasing the unwanted tension that has built up from improper posture and movement patterns. So heavy on the manuals. There's lots of ways to break up tension, but it makes it much more comfortable for the patients to use heat, hands-on treatments, gentle progressive stretching, and then slowly working into the third step, which is the correction of the movement pattern. That's starting from, all of that is starting from day one, but there's a heavy emphasis on the education to start, the manuals, and then more and more into a full session that is full correction, exercise, movement correction. And then people can get back to their daily lives, exercising, and even beyond without pain and degeneration that healthcare today makes people think is just a normal part of the aging process. It does not have to be a normal part of the aging process if you're maintaining proper posture and movement pattern.
I'm very familiar with the process of physical therapy and used to work in a medical setting. But I see patients all the time where they would have different results from different physical therapists, right? Where they would go to one and it would be almost like a treat and street, like just very routine, formulaic. Here's what we do. See you next time. Have you had instances where someone has not had success somewhere and then came to you and you've had breakthroughs?
That's typically what we see.
Right.
I tend to see the people who have done lots of physical therapy, lots of other treatments, no success, and they come to me and we are spending that one-on-one time, really getting to that root issue, really taking the time to figure out where did it fail before? Why did it fail? Let's figure that out and let's make a change specific for you. Another huge aspect in that is the psychological aspect. So I've done additional training in stress, anxiety management, and hypnosis because we have found there's a huge psychological aspect to many of the conditions that don't respond well to traditional healthcare or physical therapy because there's a whole nother piece missing, as well as functional medicine. I've partnered with some functional medicine providers like Rachel Laythorne, who's right around the corner here, because as you're getting older, hormones are decreasing, you're not getting all the vitamins and nutrients you need, and that's a whole nother conversation about farming practices today.
Sure.
But that can also play a huge part. So it's much more of a holistic approach to figure out not just what is missing from the physical treatment I'm providing, but is there an aspect that's missing psychologically, nutritionally, something else? So it makes it a much more holistic approach where I can help them identify those other factors that could be influencing their physical life.
Yeah, and I imagine that ties into something on the business too that I'm curious about, because I would suspect that most patients that come in, they want to leverage their insurance. They're either referred because they had an injury or they're primary or something, so they were referred out. But I would imagine that the insurance companies don't necessarily support like the holistic approach. They probably want it as efficiently as possible. Surprise,
Correct.
surprise. So it's cheaper, which is wild to me because that's such short-term thinking because it's going to be more long-term issues if it's not addressed correctly the first time. Am I close?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Spot on.
Yeah, I
Spot
figured
on.
as much.
It does not make sense. And it's more about who has the most money in the industry, who has better lobbyists, and where insurance is going to grant coverage. There's certain providers out there or areas of healthcare that have a lot more money behind them, are better at marketing themselves, and so they can get better coverage. Physical therapy really does need to do a better job of binding together, working together to promote physical therapy and fight for that coverage.
Well, it's wild to me that lobbying in medicine is even a thing. Even the state of again, we can go down and probably talk to you for 3 hours about this, but even pharmaceuticals and how they advertise and how that's permissible.
100% part of the problem.
Exactly right. And we're the only country that allows that. And even on the lobbying side of things, it's so crazy to me because what it should be is what is the standard of care?
Correct.
And that's what should be, built out, recommended, and processed. And it should be the same for everything.
Correct.
But
Correct.
it's not.
And that's the ugly underbelly that nobody wants to really talk about and patients don't know about, to be honest.
For sure.
So they will trust the process, trust the practitioners. And I'm not saying you can't trust practitioners. It's just there is a system in place that is definitely pushing towards pharmaceuticals, surgical intervention, more than a holistic getting to the root issue. And again, that does not mean that pharmaceuticals and surgery are not required. We all work together. That is the medical model.
For sure.
It's, but there are a lot of treatment options that are out there that aren't necessarily being promoted because they will go against pharmaceuticals. They will take out some of these other areas, some of their profits. And that's unfortunate. So holistic care, holistic providers are growing in number. And I think educational sources like this podcast, they're more readily available to patients. So the demand can change because patients are educated more. And that's a double-edged sword because now their education is online. So is that a good source, a bad source? But the demand is changing. Patients want better care, and I think that's going to be at the forefront of that change.
Yeah, no, I agree. And one thing that I always encourage people to look at is efficacy of outcome. Mm-hmm. So look at all of the different treatment options that you have and ask the question based on the data that's collected, because it is, what's the efficacy of outcome with pharmaceutical, with surgery, with therapy, blended? What does it all look like?
Absolutely.
Ask, because if you don't, you're not going to make, you probably won't make as well-informed of a decision instead of just being like, the pharmaceutical route's the best one.
Right.
Well, why?
And what I tell patients is it's always going to be a combination.
Sure.
I never want anything I'm saying to be this works, this doesn't.
Right.
It's the holistic approach properly done is looking at all of it. It is going to have some pharmaceuticals. It is going to have a surgeon looking at that patient and ruling out conditions that, are, need more attention. And it will be a team of us working together. And that's what it should be. And we as physical therapists should really be getting to that root issue, looking at that whole chain and spending more time with those patients.
Yeah, I love that. So you just crossed 10 years. So is there one particular moment or case or something that stands out as like, you were super excited to be a part of? Or?
Absolutely. Many, but there was one patient in particular so for most patients, the issue is not that you don't have the muscles. You have all the muscles you need. You just need to learn how to use them. But I had a patient who literally did have muscles removed as part of his injuries, and severe dysfunction. Like you could see the body was just torqued and turned and not moving well. And it was a challenge because I still approached it from, okay, let's see what we can recover. Let's see what muscles, can take over here, because you have multiple muscles that can assist with the same movement. And we spent months with him, and his body straightened out, even missing some bones, some muscles. And he never thought he could straighten out, get moving, live without pain. And even that case, it takes more time. It's not going to be a 4 weeks in and out, and it may not be a 12 weeks in and out.
Sure.
But we got to the root of each of those issues, and he really put in the time and effort, and the body straightened out. And that was as many times as I see it happen, that was very impressive. That was amazing.
That's great. Love to hear that. So if people are watching and they want to know more, what should they do? Where do you typically send people to learn more? Is it just simply calling in and setting an appointment?
Call in, set up an appointment, and at the initial evaluation, that's exactly what we discuss. Your whole history, what is your concern? And immediately I get started on the proper posture, movement pattern. How does this relate to what you have going on? What does this look like? This whole process specifically, where do I need you to start and focus, and where are we going to go? What are those steps going to look like? And as long as people spend the time, can step back from what they think they should be doing and just kind of refocus on what your body should be doing, then that process slowly builds, and that makes all the difference.
Love it. And Amy, is there anything else that you want people to know before we close our time here today?
Never accept somebody saying, this is just how it's going to be. You're just getting old. You just need to accept this. There's always an answer, and keep looking. Keep looking.
But Amy, thank you so much for making the time to come in today and walk me through peak physical therapy and all that you've done over the last 10 years. It's pretty incredible.
Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. All right, everybody, that's going to wrap up this week's edition of Community Capital. We certainly appreciate you watching. We'll be back next week with another episode. If you want to learn more about Amy and the great work she's doing over at Peak, you can find all of her information for her business in the show notes. Apart from that, we'll see you next week. Take care.